MetroFanTV coming to you live from somewhere in New Jersey once again for the second edition of our weekly rundown. Lenz and Fernando here, coming to you live, talking about all kinds of things. And do we have a lot to talk about this week? One game in the rear view window on Saturday and two more coming up this week, including the maiden visit of the team to the newly falling down Audi Field out in Washington, D.C. A lot on our plate here today, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to talk about just from the New England game, I think. Then we got a little bit of a congestion this week with both DC and Columbus. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess we'll just get down to it in the interest of time. Saturday was the second contest of the season against the New England Revolution at Red Bull Arena. The last game against the Revolution didn't really go so well up at Gillette, but this time they bunkered down and got a pretty solid 2-0 win against the Revolution in what was kind of a battle in the rain, I think, on Saturday at Red Bull Arena, right? Looking at the game flow, the first half was an absolutely unwatchable experience, to be quite frank. Kind of a very ugly start to the game with both teams trying to figure out each other's respective presses. New England particularly, I thought, looked really aggressive, pushing up their guys in midfield. Really looked like they were disrupting our flow of play pretty heavily. And I thought a lot of that had to really do with the game that Wilfred Zahibo had in the center of the field, really making a lot of the key interceptions for New England and marshalling the press well, in addition to the wingers on that day doubling down on what was a bit of an unfamiliar midfield configuration, right? Adams, Tchaikovsky, and Davis being preferred in the midfield.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting game. I mean, I had mentioned in the last episode where, they're a pressing team, but they don't press as hard and don't press as high. Apparently, that wasn't the case for this game. They were pressing a lot higher than I'm used to seeing them, and a lot more aggressive. And I wonder if that kind of caught them by surprise. The game, there was a lot of talk about how ugly the game was and how poor the team played. And I personally think there's a little bit of a distinction between the two. Look, when you have two teams that press aggressively, it's going to be ugly. When you have two teams where all they want to do is cut passes, press, create turnovers, throw long balls, I mean, it's not gonna be pretty. It's not gonna be the beautiful game that people are used to seeing at times. So, I understand some of the comments that were made, but again, it doesn't mean that the team was necessarily terrible, and it doesn't mean they weren't in control. It was a controlled chaos, I think. The back line did what they had to do. They really didn't have. They had a couple of chances, one clear chance. Robles made another absolutely beautiful save, but I don't think they were terribly threatening. And I think a lot of that is because, look, you might have an errant pass that gets cut out, that gets intercepted. You might get pressed and blah blah blah. But you can still have a level of control of the game by making sure it really doesn't get any worse than that. And Armis seemed to have echoed those comments when he said that he thought the first half kind of went as they expected, and kind of went almost in their favor. What we also talked about in the last episode too with them was the difference of fitness. This team is used to training and practicing very hard for the press. And you can tell that New England isn't. Just by watching some of their games, you can see they start to kind of fade out in the later parts of the game. They kind of tire out, and they start to slow things down. So I think New England made a mistake of basically just trying to go out there, being a little more aggressive than they're used to, trying to maybe go for that quick dig punch and then sitting back. It didn't happen, and then we made the right adjustments, I think, in the second half where. At that point, you're just going to capitalize. You're going to capitalize them and do what you got to do.
And looking at the way the team came out in the second half, personally, I thought it was a pretty great sign to see Reza out there to start the game. And in the first half, they were trying to figure out their roles a bit more with Adams being played in that right wing spot. And coming out in the second half, you could see that the change that sort of changed the flow of the game completely for me. I think Adams started to stay out wide a bit more once he figured out where he was supposed to be, because we have to remember that this was sort of an unfamiliar position, I think, an unfamiliar configuration in midfield for the three of them, and they sort of had to figure out their roles as they went along. But as the game progressed, you saw Adams sort of starting up to be more of a menace out there in the right wing, as he has been in the past in that right wing back formation in the 3-6-1. But the way that he played, I think, in that second half in particular, I thought that this was basically everything that people were expecting from Alex Muyl, but somehow a lot better.
Yeah,
shall we say?
That somehow Adams was able to pull off. It's funny because I'm not even sure what formation they use. It's like formation was like a social construct in this game. I tried so many times to really try to kind of figure out where they were, but there was so much interchange. There was so much moving around. Adams was all over the place. If you look at his heat map, it was kind of interesting. Because it seemed like he was a lot more all over the place than he really was. He really was out wide a lot more than it appeared. But yeah, they figured out a way to use our best guys, I think. Like at this point, Rizza needs to be in there. Obviously, Kakwe needs to be in there. Adams needs to be in there. Davis needs to be in there. And they found a way. And a bit of an unorthodox way, but they found a way. I think you have to wonder, is that going to kind of be the norm? I'm not sure. But it was good to see that we have so many guys who can play in so many different positions in so many different ways. And I think it also shows that Armas is good enough to, on a whim, come up with whatever it was that they kind of came up with. Because, again, I still can't wrap my head around exactly what the hell they were doing that game. And still come out with a win and make the adjustments in the second half. This is another game where they came out in the second half looking like a completely different team.
And that's been a bit of a recurring trend so far under the Chris Armas regime, which I thought was a pretty underrated talking point. Like, it seems to me that they are using the first 45 minutes to kind of use it as like a feeling out period for the team, and then in the second half they come out with some kind of adjusted scheme to try and take advantage of the weaknesses maybe that the other team shared during the first half. So the way it seemed to me is just try to bend but not break and don't concede in the first half, and then come out in the second all guns blazing that you get the point. And it showed it again here with whatever the instructions that were given to Tyler Adams at halftime, because as you mentioned, looking at the heat map, I mean, and looking at the build up to the second goal as well, it was notable that he was on the left wing when he caused a turnover that ended up at the foot of Sean Davis, who found Kaku.
And another thing too is it's not just Adams, it's also Amir. Like, Amir was actually cutting in a lot as Adams was pushing very out, was staying kind of far out wide, which I've never seen him. I've never seen Amir cut in that often and that aggressively. I mean, the amount of times he was in the box, not coming from the outside, but coming kind of diagonally from a little further back in the field was very different. I'm not sure they were able to anticipate that. I think that was kind of not just a shock to us, probably a shock to everyone, because you've never seen that before.
Yeah, I mean,
so now it's almost like whatever you've scouted, whatever potential things you think they can come up with, they come out of left field with, Adams being some kind of pseudo winger and Amir being God knows what the fuck he was that game. Like there was a lot going on that game that I thought was impressive. And look, this is another game where I feel like under Armas, he's made adjustments that I don't think happened before. He's made adjustments where in a game where at the end of the first half, you're kind of seeing yourself, it's going to happen. Some bullshit's going to happen where, we're going to give up some stupid goal and we're going to go out either with no points or a point, and they come out and they win. And this is the type of stuff I want to see now, because comes a playoff time when you're playing against the best of the league of your respective division, this is the kind of stuff you need to do. How many times against Columbus, Montreal, Toronto did we need some kind of drastic change and we never saw it? You're starting to see forget a plan B. You're seeing plan C, D, and E from Armas in just 2.5, just 2 games. So my pessimism is slowly starting into excitement for this Armas era.
Yeah, certainly. And I think to kind of add on to that, it's nice to see that guys who show that when they show up and make an impact on the game, like they earn a right to build on that by getting a starting spot in like subsequent games, right? You'd probably never see that under Jesse Marsh because of how set Jesse is and having.
He's never free.
And how set Jesse is and having 11 guys in a certain lineup every single week. But Armis certainly saw something in what RZA brought against Sporting Kansas City, and kind of went with a hot hand here. And I think it made all the difference because, once again, like RZA looked absolutely fantastic in that midfield with his outlet passes to the wings and his work in the press again. And, you know, I mean, I feel like I've repeated myself twice here, but you'd never see this under Jesse Marsh.
No.
Guys would never have the chance to really play their way into the starting 11 like RZA maybe has in the past few weeks. And that really fills me as well with a lot of confidence that Armis is going to have a look at what the guys have been doing recently, and we'll find a way to fit them into the squad if he feels like he can contribute.
Yeah, I mean, you know, look, I've talked about this a bunch of times on like Twitter and a discussion group, and I hate to keep bringing Verón up once in a while, but I feel like he's kind of like that perfect example of Jesse, where, you know, he even in moments where he proved himself, he was never rewarded. And I don't think you're going to see that with Armis. I think if you go on that field and you work hard and you give it your best and you prove yourself, you're going to get minutes. You know, there was a stint during with Verón where I think it was in 2016, where, I mean, games where he scored, he was benched the next game. Games where he got a really good assist, he was benched the next game. Games where he just played very well, created chances, he was benched the next game. I can't imagine that happening under Armis. I can't imagine someone doing well and not being rewarded for it. And to me, that bodes well for the locker, because now guys know, you know what, Fidel, for example, you know, this is someone who, you know, hasn't really gotten that many minutes. But I tell you what, if he works hard in training and he gets his chance, which he probably will, I can see him starting either Wednesday or Saturday. I don't think he's going to start the duo of Long and Parker for all three of these games. If he gives Fidel a chance and he does well, you're going to see him come in more. And again, I don't think, we'll have to see, of course, but if he does, and I think for me that would be a definitive statement that, you know what, all the players can now know if they work their asses off, they play well, they're going to get rewarded. And that's how you create real competition.
Right.
And that's how everybody gives it 100%, 100% of the time.
Right. Yeah. You know, I think this kind of does it for this review of the game. We'll be coming back previewing the two games, the first one in midweek and the one against Columbus on the weekend right after this.
Chambea, ala, cabrón ya no te quedan balas. Chambea, ala, cabrón ya no te quedan balas. Yo siempre picheo en rol otra vez.
And we're back, and we have even more to talk about. Of course, two games this week coming up for the mighty Metro. I guess we'll start with the one coming up on Wednesday. Our maiden voyage to Audi Field, which is already a dumpster fire. Well done, DC United.
It's already falling down.
Some
Jesus.
things never change, I guess. You waited 23 years for this shit? Really? Okay, well. Anyway, DC enter this game bottom of the Eastern Conference, as I think people might have probably expected going into the season. This is a team that kind of does lack any real star quality, I think, going in. But they have played 4 or 6 games less than everyone else because of that backloaded schedule, which they purposely did to coincide with the opening of Audi Field. Currently finding themselves 5 points behind the best team in MLS history, Toronto FC, in the Eastern Conference standings, with 1 win in the last 7 games. The last win was against Vancouver at their home opener in Audi Field, which was their first win in like 2 months, I believe. So really a team that's kind of hit a very rough patch of form. But obviously of all these away games, it's hard to really say too much about what their early season form has been, considering how many away fixtures that they've had to play because of their situation with Audi Field. But the statistics seem to suggest a team generally struggling to create any real consistent offensive production. Looking at the expected goals numbers for and against, they trend towards the lower third of the league. and coming into the game with a negative 0.3 expected goal difference per game, which
So bad.
yeah, I mean, this is a team that apparently struggles to keep teams off the board and struggles to really create much in attack, as we might have expected by now with the Benny Ball era. Right, eternal manager Ben Olsen, as we know, loves to play a very physical game, heavily reliant on a lot of choppy play in midfield.
And I feel like that's why every time we go into a game with these bastards, you almost have to throw away a lot of the statistics, just because when we walk into wherever it is that we're playing, whether it's Rebel Arena or we're playing whatever dump they're playing at the time, something happens with them where they just completely transform into a different team.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it's that physical choppiness that kind of helps them against us, because we don't want that. This team wants you to play. They don't want, consistent fouls. They don't want time to be stopping. They want the flow to keep going, so you can you have chances to press, and you have moments to kind of catch them on transition. If the play is always stopping, and if you're kind of sitting back, there's only so much you can do. So
Right.
At the same time, if this whole Armis, trying to push for more possession thing is really happening, which I feel like I'm struggling to see that a little bit, which may be a different discussion. But if that's really happening, well, then maybe we can kind of adjust to that a little bit better than we have in the past, where, okay, if you want to slow the game down, if you want to be a little chippy, fine, we'll let you do it. We're going to build up the attack a little bit more, which maybe catches them off guard.
Yeah. And I think one other wrinkle that we see with DC United this season is that the statistics suggest that this is a team that struggles to maintain possession. Like they don't really have anyone in that midfield who's particularly comfortable on the ball or particularly good at distribution, outside of maybe Acosta. But Acosta's the attacking midfielder.
Yeah.
He's still going to need guys in the back to get the ball up to him.
Mm-hmm.
And considering his diminutive frame, I mean, he's going to need some level of support. So I feel like this is a team kind of set up that lets us hit them on the press to a degree of how much they struggle with keeping possession of the ball and how much they struggle with making any real coherent passing moves. I think if you look at the majority of their chances, they've been coming down from moments of brilliance on the wings from either Stieber or Yamil Assad, or from something from Acosta to find Darren Maddox.
I keep forgetting Asada's on that.
Yeah. And
Wow.
on the topic of Darren Maddox, of course, this is a DC team that did benefit from Darren Maddox's scoring ability early in the season. He does come into the game as their joint leading goal scorer with Assad at 8 apiece, but with the introduction of Shrek, Mr. Wayne Rooney, halfway through the season, it doesn't really bode well, I think, for a team struggling to score goals, because that makes an already kind of tepid attack even slower and generally lacking a lot of pace and inventiveness. I mean, you'll make a lot of Wayne Rooney's pedigree, but at this point in his career, he's very much clearly, in my opinion, like a shell of his former self.
Yeah, I think for us, what's going to determine how well we do is if we can go out there and kind of stay composed and don't let them, like, try to avoid putting yourself in a position where they can be, chippy. Maybe string those passes a little cleaner, be a little quick with the ball, so you don't kind of give them. You're kind of bypassing a lot of that one-on-one type stuff. But at the same time, this year might be, I think, a little bit different than in the past, where at least there was something tangible with the players itself, where you can say this is going to give us a problem. This year, I don't really see any concerns on their roster.
Yeah.
And I hope I'm not, shooting myself in the foot by saying that. But I just don't. There's just not much there. I mean, and you throw in Rooney, who I feel like he's one of a couple of talking points for the whole shift of the old MLS versus new MLS. Rooney doesn't strike me as a guy that's going to come in here, and even if he gives it 100%, if he's just kind of physically able to do it, not with the travel in the league, not with all playing on turf and playing against a team like us who's going to press him a lot. And you mentioned how kind of disorganized the team is with possession. A lot of the problems with that team this year falls right into our plate.
Yeah.
A team that can't possess the ball well, a team that can't pass well, a team that's unorganized, they are not going to bode well at all against us.
Yeah.
Which, at the same time, might mean they might try to be a little more dirty, kind of be a little chippier. And if that happens, then we might see just a typical ugly DC versus a Metro game. But I don't see too much. I don't see too much positive for them coming this game. I fully expect to just walk in there and crush them and get 3 points.
Yeah. And I think that's the minimum expectation for me as well, like all things considered, to kind of wrap up this preview of DC United. A lot being made of struggling against bunkering teams, but this is a DC United team that has struggled to hold on to leads and keep teams off the board as well. I mean, bottom third in the league in terms of goals allowed this season, which kind of tells you everything you need to know about their defensive solidarity at the back. You would expect that in the past we have struggled against bunkering teams who play defensively, but this is a team that, even if they want to play defensively, doesn't particularly do it well.
Exactly.
And
there's a lot of holes in their defense where even if you try to bunker, there's enough cracks where you can get, if you have a quality enough team, you can get through those cracks and get through. Bunkering sometimes is just not good enough. You have to have a good enough team to bunker.
Yeah.
And kind of close up those cracks as much as possible.
This is probably going to be the only time I praise NYCFC on this channel, but you conned them into giving you money for Frederick Briant. That was a master stroke. That was incredible. And I guess nothing else really to talk about here.
Prediction. I'm gonna go for 3-1 again.
3-1 again.
I'm going for 3-1 again. Because I can see them getting some typical bullshit DCU goal where you're just like, did that really just fucking happen? But at the same time, I expect us, who are either first or second in goals per game. I think we're kind of going back and forth with Atlanta now at this point.
Second in the Eastern Conference.
Well, I know total we are, but I think for just per game, since we have they have more games.
Right.
They play more games though, so we're kind of going back and forth. But either way, we're top two. Best goal scoring team in the league, and they're one of the worst.
Right.
I expect us to put some through them.
Prediction for me for this game, I can sort of maybe see some silly shenanigans happening, but I'm feeling 2-1 for some reason. I vaguely expect some bullshit Rooney goal where he scores where it's like a scramble in the box and he ends up poking it in off of like his butt or something, and we come back and bag a 2-1 win. So it's going to be some nice bookends for you, from moving on from the house to Gonzalo Verón, closed RFK,
yes,
to the field that Kaku makes his mark on. I think Kaku's going to bag one against DC. And
He's due for one.
He's due for one. So that's my prediction for me. I'm feeling a 2-1 win away. Considering how scrappy they can be and how physical and how physically disruptive teams have maybe knocked us off our element a bit, but I think there's really just too much quality in our squad to not get a result against DC. Now, moving on to Greg Berhalter's Columbus, actually, who come into our clash in the weekend behind us in the standings by 5 points. They find themselves 4th overall in the Eastern Conference as of the last game week, which means that they don't have the chance to surpass us on points this weekend, which is nice. Columbus have been hit a bit of a skid recently by the looks of it. 2 wins in the last 6 since the 1-1 draw with them in Ohio. And this is seems to be that they've kind of hit a bit of a wall, this young team. So all of a sudden they find themselves struggling to score goals, which is worrisome considering that as a whole this season, that's kind of been their thing. They've been built in defensive solidarity more than any superb attacking play, and they're not really grinding out the 1-0 or 2-1 wins that they were to start the season anymore. So might be crisis season for him.
Yeah, I think, and I can't help but wonder how much of the weight of possibly this being the last season kind of resting on their shoulders. Although I think at this point, we're probably safe to say they're not moving next year. If something does happen, it probably won't be until 2020. But there's a lot going on there. They really haven't seemed, they never seemed like an impressive team. It really seemed like they were kind of just scraping by these wins, and they played a lot of games at the beginning of the season. I mean, they've played 22 games to our 19 already. So they've kind of just been higher up in the standings. Then it kind of gave a little bit of a weird illusion to how good maybe they really were. I mean, looking at the standings, they're 1.5 points per game, 9 wins, 7 losses, 6 draws, 0 goal differential. They've only scored 27 goals. They've allowed 27. Home 7-2-3, away 2-5-3. This is not. They're a mediocre team, really. I think that's probably the best way. They're not a horrendous team. They're no DC. They're no Toronto. But they're not obviously a great team. I think at this point, us, Atlanta, and the Smurfs have really separated themselves from the pack.
Right.
So being one of those 3 teams, I expect us to soundly be able to handle Columbus, especially given the position where there's really not much clicking over there right now.
Yeah, and looking at the away record, actually, seems to me that when we went down there in Ohio, I mean, that was kind of an extraordinary game considering the heat and the humidity that they experienced that weekend in Ohio. Columbus are a team that, by the looks of it, aren't quite as formidable away from home, and I think they do match up well, all things considered, considering that there seems to be, as you say, some kind of levels of a discontinuity going on with them. There were some early season revelations, I think. Lalas Abubakar holding down the fort at the back, and Milton Valenzuela on the, I think, at left back has been a pretty good outlet for them, giving them a lot of depth. And of course, you also have to talk about the one-touch hero, Kiasi Zardes, somehow coming up with 11 goals so far this season. In spite of the fact that he doesn't really touch the ball much in the system. I think it's really kind of a testament to the interesting intricacies of Greg Berhalter's system, where he's kind of thrived with getting on the ball as little as possible. But, I think with how they do have some pedigree in defense still.
I was probably a little too harsh with describing how they are, but they do have enough. I guess they do have enough individual, quality guys that maybe, that would cause a little bit of trouble if you kind of, fall asleep behind the wheel. I mean, it happened to us already once.
Yeah.
But at home, I would expect us to really take care of things.
And I think it's also kind of the Berhalter factor to a degree, because that first half that we played in Ohio against them at Mapfre was probably the worst half of soccer that we played all season.
Yeah,
and
that was really bad.
Really, they could have easily scored maybe 2 or 3 goals before the half ended. We were kind of lucky, in my opinion, to kind of walk away with a 1-1 win from that encounter. No, sorry, a 1-1 draw from that encounter, I should say. Which is kind of why I'm thinking that there are some warning signs on the weekend, particularly if we happen to concede first, because considering how good they can be at protecting leads with the defensive talent that they have, I anticipate them maybe being a bit of a tough nut if say we go down early and spend the next maybe 80 minutes trying to break down a team that's very disciplined on the defense.
Yeah.
Though that's kind of the one red flag that I can look.
And I guess so. There's also the. I don't know what their schedule is like this week. They're not playing midweek,
I don't think
they?
they play midweek now.
Yeah, so that's another factor. We're playing. We have a midweek game. So how tired will this team be going into the game on Saturday might be a little bit of an issue. If you fall behind, then maybe this team doesn't have that little extra bite to kind of claw through, and they're kind of losing that sharpness from being a little tired to kind of push them over the top and pull through a win. So, yeah, there's enough. Columbus is the kind of team where I think they're bad enough where you should have full expectation to beat them. All right, we are one of 3 teams who I feel like we should be able to walk in every game fully expecting a win. If we don't, something really went wrong. Not just because we just weren't a good team. So Columbus is a good enough team where they can get you, and they will, but bad enough where you should fully expect to beat it. You can't sleep on them, but you should be able to walk in there and beat them.
Right. I guess that leaves us with the prediction for the Columbus game, and I don't know. I could see this potentially being either a 1-0 win or a very scrappy, maybe 1-1 draw at home.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a 2-1 win. I'm gonna go with a 2-1 win just because I can see them. I can definitely see them getting by with a goal on the counter. But I think as long as we get on the board first, we can push harder, and we should be able to get that second goal, because it's just going to force them to push harder for to equalize, and that tends to open them up. So we'll see. I also think it depends on how we manage DC. If it's one of those grueling games where they're just physically exhausted and they just you kind of just collapse at the end of the game, I'll be a little more worried.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel comfortable saying a 2-1 win. But I wouldn't be surprised with a draw or something else.
Okay. Well, we'll be coming back with your questions right after this.
Opportunities. Wheel for Bezincourt. Bezincourt, the backheel for Alex Wheel. This could be trouble. Clark takes a lunge. It's into net. Verone. Gonzalo Verone is able to escort it home past Steve Clark. And the Red Bulls suddenly up 2-1.
And we're back, and once again, it is question time here on the Weekly Rundown. We once again like to thank everybody for sending in your questions. Not as much as last time, which I guess is either good or bad, depending on whether or not you liked the segment the last time. But yeah, nice, good selection here today for us once again. Thanks. First one coming from Lee on Twitter. Is Kaku God? Yes or no? Well, all things considered, I think he's already had more of an impact than Kaká in MLS. And as we know, that Kaká belongs to Jesus. And since he's a follower of Jesus, and Kaku is practically Jesus, yes, Kaku is God. I don't think that's up for debate. I don't know. It's a crackpot theory in my head. But moving on to Justin Brightbill from Twitter. Good meeting you at Forza Lucha on Saturday, Justin. Thanks for coming over and introducing yourself. We hope to see you at Audi Field. How disrespectful will Kaku's Meg on Rooney be?
Ooh.
I think it's going to be so disrespectful that Wayne kicks him and gets sent off. And then we go on to win 2-1. It'd be classic Rooney.
Yeah, it might be better than Lampard Meg from Grella. Yeah.
I was gonna cause like a whole bunch of really angry Brits to like pop up into team mentions again. Like that was such a shit show, man. Like oh dear. Like
yeah.
But
from a scale of 1 to 10, it's gonna be like a 10. It's gonna happen. I will be deeply disappointed if it doesn't happen. Especially
like not only does he meg him, but like tries to like sombrero him to like beat him the other way as well, like right after, and that results in Wayne like mouthing off to the referees or lashing out at someone. Like it's going to result in Rooney fighting Olsen on the sidelines, I hope. It'd be a really nice cap to his career, if you ask me. That'd be good stuff, Wayne.
He starts the internal rift between Rooney and, oh man, that'd be beautiful.
David Brieva on Twitter asking, what's up with the cheese empanadas, Brisas? And I guess this means that Brisas are coming out with new products soon at Red Bull Arena. If you haven't already tried them though, 3 for $9, and it gets you 3 points. Proven.
Yeah, it's a fact. It's guaranteed.
But I don't really know what's up with the cheese empanadas, so yeah.
I did see them tweeting with a couple of people about some new options.
There's like that dessert empanada or something.
Like another type of vegetarian. I don't know. I know there's talk. I'm sure there will be new ones, and if there are, we will definitely try them.
Oh man, it's gonna be like some kind of like monstrous like a new dessert empanada where they have like chocolate chips in the batter. It's not the weekly rundown without the flag falling down. You asked for it, you got it. So we hope you're happy. Anyone who had about 38 minutes in your pool before the flag fell down, congratulations, you're the winner this week. Brian Oldno on Twitter asking, how good was Adams on the right wing against New England? And, you know, we covered this a bit earlier in the show, but I guess we'll talk about it a bit more now. You know, this was one of those wrinkles that you kind of saw initially on paper and you're like, man, like I have no idea how this is going to turn out. But when you saw it in action, particularly in the second half of how disruptive he was going up against Claude Dielna, I mean, like you have to feel particularly encouraged. You know, it was kind of a out-of-the-box solution, but hey, I mean, if Tyler turns out to be the guy who slots into Velo's position and makes his own by doing the supercharged wheel impersonation, I'm for it.
Yeah, that was a surprise. I mean, you've seen him play as a 10. I didn't think we'd see him up in a wing, but here we are. So yeah, I think that's a testament to Adams. I mean, look, he's not perfect. There are definitely things he still needs to work on. You know, his first touch can kind of get away from him once in a while. He could probably be a little better with possession, but man, his mentality and just his raw ability and his understanding of the game, and clearly his ability to understand new roles and new ways of having to play is at such a high level. It's unbelievable. I mean, I can only. Is there a position he can't play other than like maybe center back and a striker? I mean, he's so versatile. He's all over the place anyway. I mean, I don't know. That's extremely impressive to see him not just go up there, but do so well in that position.
Yeah, and I think that this is only just going to fuel even more speculation that his best position is a fullback. Please don't.
Yeah.
Please spare us.
No.
Tyler can play wherever he wants.
And that's the thing. Like, yeah, he can play as a right back. He has played as a right back, but that's not his best position. He has so many better qualities. He has so many other qualities that suit him best, playing more in the middle than playing outside. Even though he obviously can play pretty well on the outside.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the case here. Another Lee, this time Lee from the Bronx, asking us on Twitter, 2 questions. Is Lade viable as a starter or as a plan B? If Murillo leaves, is that a necessary spot to fill in this window? The first part of this question, I think at this point Lade is probably not really cut out to be a starting fullback on an MLS quality team. I mean, he's a good squad player to have. He's good for a spot start maybe now and then, but I'm not really confident on relying on him for the rest of the season for reasons that we discussed last week.
Yeah.
I think the clear drop down in quality from Amir to Lade is kind of clear, and I mean, I love Connor's mentality, but there does come a point where I think, considering all things considered, like that he's just not good enough to start in this league anymore, or at least not for us anyway. So definitely plan B for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think MLS is in an interesting position where there's a pretty big disparity between like how good the attacking guys are and how good the defenders are. And I think depending on the team that you look at, that gap widens pretty substantially. Lade is a good player, but for MLS in 2018, if you want to be the best of the best, you really want to be one of those elite teams that I think we are right now. You need someone at a higher level, at a more consistent basis, and more consistently for games than someone like Lade. Again, I like Lade. Like you said, he's good for a spot start. He did okay in the last 3 games he started, but he had some very shaky moments, and you can't have that many shaky moments every single game when you're going against some of the best teams in the league. So. Yeah, I mean, he's great as a plan B. He's great to have on the bench to come in, an occasional start here and there. But for a starter, yeah, it can't be him.
I think to answer the second part of this question, I mean, it would be nice to bring in a fullback. I don't think it happens, unfortunately. I think it's pretty hard on short notice to bring in a fullback who can match Amir's production in that spot halfway through the season and expect him to integrate like solidly. So it kind of pains me to say it. I would like to see some moves being made to address that, but I don't think it happens, unfortunately. So yeah, I would say it would be necessary, but it's unrealistic. I think that's
probably the best way to put it. I mean, it takes, look, as good as Amir is, he had one or two games where he played not long after he got here, from what I remember, and he did pretty bad. But he spent a good half a season with Red Bull too, you know, and that's really what groomed him into the player he is now.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of guys we're getting. We're not getting guys who are going to be able to really just kind of walk in and just absorb that. Whoever we bring in is going to need some time to kind of learn and adapt into the system. And it's one of those things where you could theoretically bring in a player who's better technically and who just has more raw talent than bringing up someone like, you know, Cutler to fill in or something like that. But Cutler's, just as an example, his understanding of how the team's supposed to play is going to be at a higher level right off the bat than anyone who comes in. So you're almost better off maybe starting, you know, someone like Cutler in replacement of him, or Leahy if you had to.
Yeah. Second question he asked us, also, should I change my Twitter handle from Pusetto.exe since everyone is saying it's no longer viable? I can't handle this watch myself.
You're about a week late.
Well,
unfortunately.
You know, he may have signed with Udinese, but here's the thing. We didn't necessarily say that Pusetto was signing this year, did we now? Listen, if you believe, then it may come true at some indeterminate point in the future. Carry the watch on. Be the solitary watchman that we all deserve. But honestly, it's your Twitter. Just do whatever you want with it. Like I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, dude. I'm sorry. Like, Luca Corporente, thanks once again for the questions, Luca. On the discussion group, sent asking us, don't you think that Royer needs to step out from the starting 11 for a while? In my honest opinion, he isn't in good shape. Kind of been a hot button issue, I think, in the fan base that hasn't quite been discussed a lot recently. I think, yeah, you know, I mean, he did score the opening goal on Saturday, which was kind of valuable, but, you know, when it comes to stepping out of the starting 11, I mean, like, none of the options behind him in the depth chart have really warranted a case for higher inclusion. I mean, behind him on the depth chart is who I think Mule and Etienne.
Well, I don't know if
Mule's more of a right winger, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's mainly just Etienne, and I mean, Derek hasn't really pushed him for time. There are some lumps to Royer's game. I think his decision making still hasn't been great. He gets a bit too predictable sometimes, but to be honest, I don't think any of the guys behind him in the depth chart, again, have really made a case for higher minutes. So,
yeah, I think it's a tough situation because if you did have somebody, then absolutely you sit him for a little bit. I mean, I guess last year was a fluke. I mean, I don't know. He has great moments. He's had some good moments this year, but he just can't seem to find that final step. There's just still something missing. I'm not sure if it's you know, tactics, if it's just something mentally. He did score, you know, he did put himself in a good position to score yesterday, but yeah, there's still some things during the game where you kind of you can't help but kind of question you know, where Royer's at. But yeah, I throw in Etienne for a start or two, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. I think you kind of lose a little bit with Etienne as well. Like there are certain things that I think Etienne would do better, but when it comes to actually scoring, that's where my concern comes. I feel like you just inherently lose the option of a real goal scoring threat.
Yeah. Tim Gale in the discussion group sending us a 2-pack this week. Discuss score predictions for the game against DC. Tim, we answered that earlier in the show, so you don't have to listen to this long to hear the answer for that question. So you can tune out for this next 30 seconds. But he did send us a second question. Will Rooney work out for DC or not? He's already showing signs of what he did when he returned to Everton last year. Sloppy passes, lashing out, complaining to refs, and just not having the legs for it. And we did kind of touch on this as well, but, you know, to go further in depth, yeah, I don't think that Wayne Rooney was a particularly good use of resources to bring in. I don't think he's the right guy. I think it was clearly a move that was made to bring in someone with name recognition and try and entice people to come out to the stadium to watch him.
Yep.
And, you know, it did work at Audi Field's opening game because apparently the field the crowd really did get loudest when he stepped onto the field. But when it comes to making an impact or being a difference maker for DC United, I'm not sold on it. I don't think it's going to really work out. He's never had the best he's never been the most technical player. He's relied a lot on his athleticism, which is kind of dried up at this point. And yeah, I mean, I find it hard to really say that this is going to be a great signing that's going to put him in the upper echelon of the league.
Yeah, I kind of touched on it before, but I think there's a discussion to be had with the kind of players, the kind of quote-unquote stars that come to MLS now, compared to how it was before. I think at this point, it's pretty clear where if you're a guy that's still doing well internationally, then you're still gonna do well in MLS. But if you're a guy who's kind of just, you know, floated around and really hasn't like made a big impact for wherever you're at, and you're kind of just riding your name at that point, you're not going to come into this league. You're not going to do well. Yeah. For me, it's really that simple. And I'm not saying that it's because MLS is a super high level, but there are things in this league that other leagues don't have to deal with. That as much as people want to just stupidly brush off as, oh, they're professionals or athletes, you know, they're not actually gods. They're still human beings.
Yeah.
And you know, the difference between kind of, you know, half-assing it in practice and then jumping on a flight, not in a charter flight, but the same shitty planes that we fucking fly in, or the same shitty planes that teams fly in. You know, you fly 5.5, 6 hours across the country, and you know, 3 hour time zone difference. You know, shitty hotels. I mean, all these things. You know, playing on turf, there's playing in different weather elements. Like all these things are things that take a toll on you. These are things that do affect the quality of the game, and I don't think that's talked about enough when people talk about MLS. But that's a different discussion. But I just don't think if you're not a player who's mentally focused coming like before you got to MLS, it's not going to change when you get to MLS. Lawton's an example of that. That guy is a monster. He doesn't give a fuck where he's playing. He can play a Sunday league game, and he's going to still do Zlatan things because that's the person he is. Yeah. You know, if you're looking to come in here and kind of just skimp around and hope for some kind of last minute resurgence, it's not like it's a different league these days. It's just not going to work.
Yeah. Wrapping out the mailbag this week, Brian Rice asking on Twitter, if there is one song/chant that you wish the South Ward would sing but doesn't currently, what would it be? I think, as some of you may know, I am a season ticket holder in the South Ward, and in hanging out with Vampire Supporters Club, having a few chants formulated in my head. I mean, there are a number on my list that I would like us to do, but they're all really obscure chants from Japan. So I can't really give too many names for you because you're all kind of in Japanese and stuff like that. But what I will say though is that I'm going to shill for the J-League momentarily. And if you haven't experienced the fan culture surrounding the Japanese game, I mean, there are just so many great songbooks out there in Japan. I mean, I brought over one from Kawasaki Frontale that 101 does now. You know, it's a chant called Rabbit that I really loved, and I'm really glad that took off. There are a couple others on my list that I kind of want to bring over. So give yourself a cursory glance at some of the fan videos that they put out there on YouTube, because some of these teams in Japan, man, they got great songs. Like, look it up as soon as you can, because there's some just absolutely fantastic material from that part of the world.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I unfortunately I don't sit in the South Ward, but yeah, I mean, there's a couple of songs in down in South America that are pretty cool that I wish we could kind of pick up on. There's a couple that they tried, it just kind of hasn't, South Ward kind of just hasn't picked up on. I feel like we could just kind of, this would end up spilling into Southward politics. So I'm just going to stop right there. But yeah, there's a couple. Maybe that's a Twitter discussion.
Yeah. And I mean, we don't really want to get too much into this right now. But that kind of does it for us here today on MetroFanTV. Weekly Rundown, Episode 2 is in the books. Once again, we appreciate your feedback, we appreciate your questions, and we appreciate, as always, you interacting with us online. But for now, let's hope for 6 points this week, because we're getting into the crunchy end of the season. But for now, MetroFanTV, Lenz and Fernando here saying peace, and fuck DC United.